TV personality and former advisor to the president, Omarosa Manigault Newman. Really good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Just in case some of our viewers and listeners don't know the context in your sort of relationship with Trump, you were on The Apprentice with him and formed a great alliance there. When he came into power, you were hired as an advisor, but you spectacularly fell out. I don't know what your relationship is like now and whether or not you have some sort of schadenfreude and feel a little bit happy to see the Democrats are doing better, as it turns out this morning.
Good morning, Isabel. Good morning, Ellie. You're certainly right. 20 years ago, I was on a show called The Apprentice, but that was a very long time ago. I've been in politics for about 25 years, serving 2 U.S. presidents and working on Capitol Hill. But let's talk about this election and the significance of the election, particularly for Donald Trump. Donald Trump thought that there was going to be this incredible red wave, that there was going to be a statement made in the country that he still had a grip on the GOP. But what we saw tonight is that Donald Trump doesn't have the same political influence that he once had over his own party or in elections as a whole.
We were just speaking to Justin Robert Young from the podcast Politics, and he said it wasn't a red wave, it was more like a red wedding from Game of Thrones. He said this was really quite shocking to Republicans. Do you think Trump will be deterred by what he's seen last night and this morning? It doesn't look like that red wave that he had perhaps hoped ahead of what we're expecting to hear from him next week in terms of running for the White House in 2024.
You know, I talked to an advisor that's in Trump's camp who stated very clearly that Donald Trump was disappointed with the results of very key races that he thought that they had in the bag. And so I think that his camp is going to have to go back, regroup, and come up with a new strategy as to how they're going to move forward. Otherwise, he could be very vulnerable in his quest to return back to the Oval Office.
Do you personally welcome the idea of him standing? I mean, there were lots of hints being dropped yesterday that he was going to announce next Tuesday at Mar-a-Lago. Or do you think the Republican Party would do well to rid themselves of him, given all the controversy in terms of the Capitol Hill riots and everything that comes with the Trump brigade?
I think that there are bigger issues for Donald. I mean, he's probably going to be indicted. He could certainly face some jail time. I mean, does the GOP want that type of baggage with their candidate that will weaken them and make them vulnerable to loss and defeat? So I do think that they should shift and look at new, fresher candidates as they move forward. But Donald doesn't go down without a fight. He is going to announce his candidacy. He's going to run again for president.
Should they be looking at Ron DeSantis? I mean, he's had a really good run in Florida, came out of nowhere 4 years ago. Very good night for him, but in the same state as Mr. Donald Trump. So could Mr. Trump be feeling quite threatened right now?
Well, just as a little context, I was working for Donald when he endorsed Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis was in trouble in his race, and then Donald stepped up to endorse him, which actually saved his candidacy, and that's how Ron DeSantis became governor. It is interesting that the two of them will probably go head to head. And certainly Ron DeSantis is much more popular in Florida than people expected, 60% plus in his victory this evening. I know that this is going to be a showdown between the two of them. And there's a saying, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers.
Just finally, for people in the UK who wonder, why is any of this relevant really to us? Look, we saw a deterioration in the historic special relationship under Truss when Biden was coming out criticising overtly her policies. And it was an uncomfortable moment, I think, for people questioning whether or not that relationship was damaged. What do you think is the best outcome from these midterms or indeed from the presidential election in 2 years' time in terms of British interests?
Well, I think that all across the world, we're seeing this impact of these economic policies. And in our own country, we have a recession that's happening and people are hurting. They're making decisions between whether to fill prescriptions or to fill their gas tanks. And so for our country, but also the global community, I really do believe that Mr. Biden is much more tempered than Donald Trump. You remember what it was like for a Trump presidency and how his randomness, his inconsistency, his volatility really made the world as a whole unstable. So it is my opinion that Mr. Biden would be a better choice in his impact of what's going on in the US, but also in the global community.
I just want to ask you, whilst we've got you, your thoughts on Meghan Markle, who's just in her latest podcast been talking about the label difficult women being put down to women. And I noticed that you previously have talked about how if men are described as villains, they're seen as assertive. But if that label is given to women, it's seen in a negative light. Would you agree with Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, on this then?
Well, first of all, I can't wait to read both Harry's book and to see what new projects they have to come out. I have to tell you that I have met Meghan in the past in Hollywood during my days in entertainment, and she was always very lovely, very professional. And so I think that when statements that she makes are taken out of context, that sometimes the perception is, negative. I haven't had a chance to review what you're asking me, and so I'm going to refrain from having an opinion on it. But I will say that my encounters with Meghan Markle in the past have always been overwhelmingly positive.